Did the stream get restarted? Almost there. Much smoother? Okay. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Ben Pomeranke. I'm going to be your host tonight. I am a software developer. I actually have talked to some of these people about hiring in the past. So you got a great panel tonight. I'm going to just do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then I'm gonna let them kind of tell you a little bit more about themselves. So we're going to start with Lynsee DeGraw, and please correct me if I'm saying that wrong. So Lynsee has been a talent acquisition specialist for Midwestern Interactive for a year now. Midwestern Interactive is an embedded teams provider based in Joplin and Springfield, serving some rad clients. Names like Lyft, Meetup, Coca-Cola. And we're always looking for great talent. They are always looking for great talent, to help serve them. Last year, they made it into the list of fastest growing private companies because their model works and best workplaces because their culture does too. Everybody welcome Lynsee. All right, next we have Maranda Provance. Correct? Mostly? Provance, sorry. I speak a little French. That's how you say it in French.
Yeah, my husband says, don't church it up. We're from the Ozarks.
All right, so Maranda is the Director of Development at Mostly Serious, where she provides vision, oversight, and management to a small team of web developers. At Mostly Serious, she works together with a talented group of designers, writers, and developers to create beautiful websites that help companies get real results. She also co-founded the Geek Foundation, a nonprofit organization that seeks to increase the tech employee pipeline by making it more diverse. Everybody welcome Maranda. Next, we have Tim Franklin. So Tim works in the UX department at Duck Creek, focused primarily on their design systems and helping the company's suite of products adopt it. He graduated from MSU in 2005 with a BS in CIS and has worked in startups, large corporations, and mid-sized companies alike. Part of his job responsibilities over the years have included recruiting, interviewing, hiring, coordinating a hiring pipeline for multiple departments, and managing several engineers. Tim also used to be the Supreme Chancellor of the Springfield .NET User Group for many years. Everybody welcome Tim. And last but not least, Wesley Livesay, correct? All right, so Wesley joined us tonight to actually sit in the crowd with you all. But as we were setting up, we did find out that one of our panelists could not make it tonight. So Jordan McAdoo was planning on being here until about 10 o'clock this morning. So with that last minute shuffle, we were going to go with 3 panelists, but Wesley has graciously agreed to join the party. So Wesley, give a little short bio about who you are and where you work and all that good stuff.
Sure. So I work at Gravitate Solutions, a community brands company, to give the full title. I'm an engineering manager, and I've been doing hiring for us for, I don't know, Tim, when did you leave? Because I took it over from you 2 years ago. Yeah. Hiring developers and then managing those developers on our development teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Everybody welcome Wesley. All right, so I read you kind of the boring bio, but I want to learn a little bit more about these panelists before they start answering some questions. So I've asked them all to think of something interesting about them, a fun fact. And so we're going to go down the line, and whenever you're ready, we'll start with you, Lynsee.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm Lynsee. I'm the talent acquisition at Midwestern. Let's see, fun fact about me. My background is in college recruiting, so that's kind of where I come from. My degree's in clinical psychology, so that's kind of the background there. I have been adjacently affiliated with Midwestern for about 4 or 5 years, so I've got to watch them grow from 15 employees to over 100, so it's been pretty cool to watch.
Awesome. Maranda?
Fun is not my middle name, but the first thing that came to mind was that people might be surprised to know that I was a 500-hour certified yoga teacher. I haven't kept up with my registration post-pandemic, But I did teach a few yoga classes at work, and I try to bring a sense of zen and flexibility to the management I do at Mostly Serious.
It's awesome. We might have to get her to come out do a dev night yoga.
Oh boy.
All right, Tim.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim Franklin. Good to see some familiar faces and some that I haven't met yet. I used to be a lot more active in the group for many years, and I've stepped away for a lot of other things going on in my life, but I'm glad to be back. Fun facts, I work remotely from Springfield, and I help with my son's baseball team. He's back in the corner there. Hey, Everett. And I play video games with some other friends online, and my wife and daughter. We all, just hang out together and spend a lot of good time together. And I won the Best Dressed Award at the Springfield holiday party. So appreciate you guys coming out. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you for that. Wesley, finish us off.
So again, I'm Wesley Livesay. For a fun fact, I've done a history podcast since 2014 on a weekly basis. It has nothing to do with development or interviews, so don't worry about it. That's what I spend a good amount of my time on.
Awesome. All right, so do we have a follow-up question already? What's the podcast called?
I'm a bad promoter. So it's called History of the Great War and History of the Second World War. Very boringly named.
We'll have to put that in the show notes afterwards. I don't know if we do that, but why not? All right. So we have a few starter questions, but we really do want to get all of you to ask some questions. So what I would like you all to do, if you haven't already, pull out your phone and jump on Slido. So this QR code here. And what it will allow you to do is ask questions in the moment. It'll also let you ask questions or upvote other people's questions. So even if you didn't ask a question, but you want something that somebody else already asked to be asked instead, you can upvote it. And that'll allow you to write down your questions while you're listening to their answers and kind of line up a few more questions. And maybe Lynsey's going to be asking herself some questions later. We'll see. Yeah, you can say who you are in Slido. You can also leave it anonymous. All we care is that the question is appropriate. So if you ask an inappropriate question, we didn't pay for this instance of Slido, so we will have to say it's been answered even if it hasn't, so it'll disappear. But please only put respectful questions in there. We'd like to not need the moderation. If we need it, then we probably have to pay money next time. So, all right. So before we get into the Slido, I'm just going to ask a few questions, and the panelists have been prompted to kind of answer what makes sense for them. We do want to hear from all of them, but some may have the same answer for the same question. So we're not going to get an answer for every single question. We're going to try to see how this goes. If I need to be more explicit about prompting people, I will. All right, so our first question, what does your interview process look like? Give us a little day in the life in an interview at your company.
Sure, I'll take it. Okay, so our interview process involves several different phases. The first phase of the interview process is with our talent acquisition agent, who does an initial phone screen, make sure you can work in the United States, checks the resume, make sure it is up to our specifications. And then our TA agent will then talk with me, the hiring manager, and send me their notes from their conversation as well as the resume and ask me if I want to talk to this person. And then if I do, if the resume looks good, if it looks like a good fit for our team, there's a 30-minute phone screen with me where I try to get some idea of, your technical skills or your job experience, just anything that would say, hey, we should take you on to the next phase, which at our company is a 3-interview series where you meet with 2 to 3 different people in each of the panel interviews to discuss different topics. We like to break it down into smaller groups because we think large panel interviews can be intimidating, especially to first-time interviewers. So it's just 3 sets of 2 people throughout the interview process. And then after that, then it moves on to an executive interview where you meet with at the moment, the general manager of our business unit. I think because he just likes to give his opinion on people we hire. I think that's probably the biggest reason we do that. And then, if you get to that far, then probably going to give you an offer and talk money. Let's be honest, we're going to talk money before we extend that offer. So
Awesome. Anybody else want to share?
I can share a little. I'll try to keep it short, but in contrast to that, we're probably the smallest company, if I had to guess. We have 15 people at our agency, and so there's no initial HR screen. We have a three to four step process. First step is a phone call initial screening with me. Similar to them, it's just kind of some basic questions to see if we can move to the next round. We'll take a few people into the second interview, which is with me and at least one other member of the technical team. And we ask questions to get a feel for, really dive into technical experience, and then also get a sense of like soft skills. And then our last round, we typically only take one candidate to our final culture interview, and it's with me and the president and the CEO, where we dig into more of the values and principles that shape our company. We have a very clear point of view around our values, and we're really looking for someone who will fit well in the culture. And then past that, we tend to do a test project rather than having a technical on-the-spot interview, because I'm worried that would screen out someone who just gets nervous or like clams up in person when, or over Zoom, when really our jobs are done, from a computer, sometimes by ourselves, often by ourselves, right, where we have Google at our disposal. So we tend to do a paid test project to review skills instead of a technical interview. And after all that looks good, we extend an offer.
Awesome. Any other contrasts or things you guys do differently?
I can add just a little bit. Duck Creek is a full software development company, but my department is the UX department, so user experience. And so we're also hiring designers and researchers and some other roles that aren't just development. I imagine everyone else in the panel probably does some as well, but we also tailor some of the different content that we interview for based off of the role. And so if we're interviewing a designer, we may give them a design project, maybe as homework or maybe just kind of in the moment, and we talk through some requirements and they had them sketch some things out on a digital software. Or it might talk about some research things. We talk about like user personas and understand some of the different concepts with that. And then from a dev perspective, we have some like CSS tests that we do where we would like give you a series of different pieces on a page, and then give you a selector and say which items would be highlighted by this code in CSS or something like that, just to kind of gauge your general skill. And so we have kind of a tailored process depending on who it is that's interviewing as far as the role.
Awesome. So just a quick follow-up question, and maybe for some of the other panelists. So a lot of you described a very full process where you invest a lot of time in each candidate. What would you say is your average investment in each of the candidates you pursue? Say somebody that goes all the way to a full-time hire. How many hours, minutes, days do they spend in the interview process? Rough estimates are totally fine. It does not have to be perfect.
There are roughly 2 hours and 45 minutes of interviews in our process, which is, I'm assuming some prep time from the candidate as well. So I would expect 3 hours plus of time commitment.
We're probably looking at about half of that. I'd say our process looks pretty similar to Miranda's in a three-step. So about 20 minutes for an initial prelim, about 45 for a technical screen with an engineering manager, and then another 30 or so with our CTO.
Just add a little bit to that too. I would also highly encourage you to spend prep time of your own, just understanding the company and understanding who you're going to interview and some of that too, because that will make the interview a lot smoother and show your interest. And so I would expect a little more time than whatever the actual interview time is to devote to wherever you're interviewing.
Awesome. Great advice. All right, next question. We're going to go a little different direction, but in these interviews you were just talking about, what are some of the things you've heard candidates say? What are some of the great things you've heard them say? What stood out to you as qualifying aspects of the candidate when they were interviewing? What do you look for when talking to candidates?
One of the questions that I ask people is what's pulling them away from their current position, and what are they hoping to find in the next, maybe that they're not getting now, or obviously entering the field and looking for. And I think you can tell a lot about what somebody values in their next workplace. So when people are looking for culture, when people are looking for a great team to learn from, when people are looking for leaders where they can grow their skills underneath, I think that tells a lot about someone. So just mentioning culture and asking about culture is super cool to hear.
Awesome. Any other good ones?
I have a quick one here. I really like when people ask new and interesting questions. Like, there are lists out there for questions you should ask in an interview, but anybody who's done a lot of interviews or interviewed a lot of people will have heard those questions 100 times. And so it's really cool when somebody comes up with something unique and pertinent to the job and pertinent to their experience that makes them really stick in my mind really strongly.
To kind of combine these two, I also think asking questions about culture is good for both of you, because if they give an answer you don't like, I mean, that's good for you to know. But if they give an answer you do like, it's often very clear on their face. Like the last person I hired, so many of his values and what he was looking for, it just felt like a perfect fit, like hand in glove fit. And so be candid about those things. And if the place you're interviewing with has the same values as you, then that should be really clear and good for both parties to know.
I would say that if I ask you a question you don't know the answer to, tell me you don't know the answer. Don't lie to me, because I will probably be able to tell. And if I am unsure of your answer or not sure why you're saying that, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question about that. And I'm going to dive a little deeper and maybe a little deeper to try to understand, what do you really know about this, or do you not? And a lot of times not knowing is actually okay. It is something that I don't expect you to always know everything. I'm trying to see where on the spectrum of skills you are, as far as how much you know, how advanced you are, where you would need more help, where you would more training, et cetera. And I always love it when someone also says, I don't understand that question. Can you rephrase it a little bit? Or I don't have experience with that, but I do have experience with this, and I find that to be similar in this way. So you can relate other things back to that, and I can agree or disagree as to whether that's actually similar, but we have a conversation that way. And that way we're not just hitting bullet points of, do you know this, do you know that, yes, no, yes, no. Like, I want to get to know you while I'm interviewing you. And another thing that I always enjoy is when someone asks me towards the end of the interview, what about this interview makes you possibly doubt my eligibility for this, or what can I clarify for you to make you feel like I'm a strong candidate for this, et cetera, because it gives me an opportunity to come back and say, oh, well, actually, I did want to know a little bit more about this because I'm not quite sure about this. And I can either be candid and give you a straight answer as an interviewer, or I can say, no, I think we're okay, and move on. But either way, you've given yourself that opportunity to then come back around and either reestablish or reiterate something that may or may not be a big point of emphasis for your candidacy moving forward.
Awesome. Now, the opposite. What are the worst things you've heard in an interview?
Similarly to how you can tell a lot of good about somebody on what they're asking, what kinds of questions they're asking you, you can also tell the flip side of that, right? Like, if the things that are important to them to know don't really align with what we're looking for. So if people ask, like, am I going to have to do this? Do I have to track my time? Do I have to come into the office? If people are asking, do I have tos? Then that's just kind of telling me what's important to them, like what they want to put into it, as opposed to how is the culture in the office? How often will I get to see my team? Those kinds of questions. So be very strategic in the questions that you ask, because that's where a lot of that information comes from. I did mention that I asked the question, like, what's pulling you away from your current position? And that's never a question to, like, I'm not seeing that as an opportunity for, like, I don't want people to talk bad. I'm not trying to open that window to talk bad on their existing company. I really just want to hear, like, the small pieces that are missing, so that maybe I can find out if we're the right fit to fill those for them. But sometimes people do take that opportunity, and I would never advise that to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a fine line. But if you can do it eloquently, it also expresses your ability to communicate well.
For sure.
So definitely think about that question before you go into an interview, because it probably will be asked. I did have one thing that came to mind. Oh, go ahead.
I think the worst thing that happens sometimes in interviews is when they just don't communicate. Like, you ask them questions, you get short, curt answers. They have no questions for you. The good news is that the interview is often over quickly, so I can move on with my day. But I think those are my worst interview experiences, when it's just like trying so desperately to pull anything out of the candidate, and they just do not allow that to happen.
So yeah, I mean, the memory that came back for me on this question was, I always ask people about their strengths and weaknesses, because I think it's good to understand what they feel about themselves. And one time I had someone who basically couldn't give an answer for his weakness. And that was a huge red flag to me, because every strength comes with a corresponding weak point. So I know, just like by the nature of humanity, at least you could, like, say that there's a potential flaw that comes with the strength that you have, and he couldn't even really do that. And so even though he was, like, an excellent technical fit, I just couldn't hire him, because I thought that kind of, he would either be too cocky or just not, like, vulnerable or open enough, and just wouldn't fit in well or play nice with others. So I had to turn down someone who was otherwise a perfect fit based on that answer, essentially.
To re-emphasize what Wes was saying there too about not having questions, like one of the questions that I always dislike having is from at the beginning of, what is it that your company does? Tell me about the basics of your company. Like, you should know that. You should go into the interview having already done at least a little bit of prep work for that. It's ideal if you know what my role is, if you know who you're being interviewed by, and can learn a little bit. It's not a ego thing, it's a understanding, and we can get to the point faster without me having to repeat the same spiel over and over about what our company does, what our department does, what I do in that department, etc. That's all things that we can find out ahead of time, and it also, again, shows your interest in the company. And so if you take 5 minutes to Google, or go to my company website and understand a little bit about it, you can also ask me some more specific questions, like, I see that your company has this insurance tech product. What is different about that, or I saw this on your website, or whatever else, and how does this role apply to it? Like, show me that you are interested, and don't just have no questions. Have something that you're giving back in the interview as well.
Also, to your point, the advice that I always like to give to people is find the conversation between the questions. That's sometimes more important than your answers to them. Like, we want to see the person behind the interviewee, you know, so always take advantage of those small conversational pieces when you can.
Awesome. One more non-audience question, and this is a little bit of different tack than the previous question. So, since COVID-19, how has interviewing changed? So in the last 3 years, what has changed about the interview process for you and your company?
So before COVID, my company had 2 offices here in Springfield and in Washington, D.C. Starting in late 2020, we started hiring from all over the United States. So that was a really fun transition. I think honestly the first thing that came in my mind. So for a long time, I was the one, we didn't have a talent acquisition person, and so I was the one reviewing resumes. And let me tell you, when you are hiring anywhere in the United States, the number of resumes you get for almost any position is overwhelming. So it presented us with a massive amount of talent, and it became much more challenging to find the needles in the haystack instead of trying to find people to apply, which is a lot of what happened when we were geolocated in just 2 places.
Yeah, the only thing that's really changed for us is just we switched to work from anywhere, so we can interview over Zoom, and that's the way it's happened for the last 1.5 hires. I think 2 hires ago, part of his interviews were pre-COVID, pre-shutdown, and then the last interview was over Zoom post-shutdown.
Yeah, Midwestern's interview process has changed, but not necessarily because of COVID, really just because the company has continued to grow, and as that happens, our interview process tends to expand a little bit. So yeah, obviously those Zoom calls are a thing. We used to do a more technical project, but now we have kind of shifted over to the technical interview piece.
I would say with Duck Creek, pre-COVID, we were already an international company with people all over the world, and so we already did virtual interviews pretty often, and we did previously want people to be at least near an office, but now it is remote first, and so our closest office is in Bolivar. I work full-time in Springfield, but it's also an option, so we want to be available wherever other people, if you want to work in an office, if you want to work from home, if you want to do some sort of hybrid, et cetera, and so we do a lot of Zoom calls and video calls. But we were doing that mostly prior to that as well.
All right, so the moment has come. We're going to switch over to Slido. I don't know if Levi, you can show the Slido up on the screen. And I'm going to attempt, I think if I click this button, does it show you what the main question is? It does not? I thought it jumped it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong.
I think you got the most upvoted here, right?
Yeah, I thought there was a way you could mark it as being answered, but it's okay. I can take it away from there whenever it's done. All right, so first question from Anonymous. What is some advice you'd give to job seekers that don't have prior work experience, interns, entry-level devs, et cetera?
I can answer. The biggest thing I look for from anyone, but especially new people, is real or semi-real work. So anyone who has the skills can rebuild whatever website they see on the web. One person I interviewed that was a new person just redid a basic version of the Hulu homepage with interactivity. I've also seen people who have an aunt or uncle with a small business and build them a website. So one, that shows me you can actually do something real and shows me your skill level. And two, it shows that you have initiative and can do things without necessarily being asked. So that's the biggest thing I look for personally.
For me, so I've interviewed a lot of people right out of college or also out of code boot camps, very popular these days. And I think the number one thing I look for developers coming out of those programs is that, you're going to have a lack of experience. It's a lot of just learning experience in classes and things like that. But being able to speak to what you learned, maybe you actually paid a little bit of attention, is really good, especially if there are projects. Highlight the projects that you worked on. Be able to speak to what you actually did on those projects and what the problems you had to solve is great to talk about in those kinds of situations.
I would definitely second that. And just understanding what your role was like on those projects also helps me, so I can understand, did the other people do most of the work, or were you actually contributing and active, and what was the communication like? because that's a big part of this. It's not just can you go, put yourself at your computer and just get the job done. Are you going to be able to work with the other people, whether they're clients or whether there's people that are in other roles or bosses and other stakeholders and things that are going to be involved. We're not expecting you to be perfect. We're not expecting you to be extroverted or anything like that. It's just that can you communicate and can you work with other people well? And I would say also from the UX side, if you have a design portfolio of some kind, it does not have to be super polished, but it's having something that you can share, that's great. It's an add-on. It's not always a requirement, but from a design role especially, that's helpful. And I would say, especially like college students, while you're working on different projects and stuff, take screenshots. And as well as if you are working on something that's for for your current job or for a customer, make sure that you have permission to take screenshots of your projects and to share information about that later. But keep some sort of assets for that so that you could talk to it. That's something I learned later on in life even, because I had a lot of projects, I did some really cool things, but I have nothing that I can actually show because they were specific for the enterprise company that I worked for in the past or whatever else. And so I could speak to it, but I have nothing to show people just to talk about the project. It's not necessarily about how good was the design 10 years ago or whatever else. It's more like, here's just an idea of what I'm trying to describe to you. And so having some sort of reference for those just makes it more conversational and helpful for the person that's trying to understand what your background is, regardless of whether it's a project or actual career experience.
Awesome. All right, moving on to the next one. So this may be for the engineers in the room, but how critical is networking? Oh, sorry. I'm an engineer, so I thought this was about actual networking, but I'm guessing this is social networking in the computer science industry.
It's very important to have your Cisco certifications if you're out there looking for a job.
Huge, especially for this previous question, right? Like if you're looking for an internship, if you're looking for an entry-level position, go to these things. Go to your college job fairs. Honestly, who you know is a very important part of the industry. Use your LinkedIn and use it wisely. Make all of the connections you can. Get comfortable having those face-to-face conversations because they will pay off when the time comes.
I also think that networking with action through opportunities like OpenSGF and Hack for Good are great too, because you'll have people in hiring positions that are mentors there or help running the show, and they'll notice the effort that you're putting in. I think I've also heard that basically everyone who's come to OpenSGF has been hired by Levi, so.
I
Love
would
the
say
plugs.
that it's more important now, especially if you're looking for remote work, because of what I mentioned earlier, where for companies that are hiring remote, they can get so many resumes. Like it is so hard to stand out in the resume pile that some kind of networking is really going to help you just get to the top of that pile, which sometimes is half the battle.
All right, thanks. And sorry for misreading the question. Next one, how do you see ChatGPT or Codex AI affecting new developer hiring in the next 1 or 2 years?
Nobody's going to ever trust a cover letter ever again. I've played around a little bit with cover letter generation with the GPT stuff, and I mean, it probably does a better job than me, maybe sometimes. So yeah, I think that's going to be a problem.
I mean, I have seen, I don't know about this specific platform, but I have seen some developments of like interviewing platforms that kind of AI generate questions based off of job listings. So I could see like a potential extra step in interviewing process, just like doing recorded interviews and that kind of thing. Maybe adding or changing a step in the interview process. But I don't know. I'm no tech guru.
I would say if you're having it generate code for you, I'm going to ask you about the code anyway. And so you can have it generated, but I'm still going to expect you to understand it, because if you didn't write it yourself, that doesn't help show me what you can or can't do. Same thing from a design. If you have it generate an image or something. You can Google the handshakes that some of the different things have tried to generate, and the hands are all goofy, and it's not perfect, but they're getting better at some of that stuff. So it's interesting, and it's something we have to keep an eye out as interviewers. But at the same time, it doesn't replace the conversations and understanding, just not learning about the person as opposed to just the skill of technical writing or code generation and that sort of thing.
I saw a meme the other day that was about how, like, if you use that to make your code, you will just spend so much more time finding and fixing the bugs because you don't know what you wrote in the first place. So save yourself the time and know how to do it precisely.
And just a slight clarifying question. You don't see this as causing less openings for new developers. You guys answers very specifically about how it'll affect the interviewing process, but you don't foresee these technologies lowering the need of actual software developers.
I think in a lot of instances, the things that AI generated stuff is going to excel at are jobs that companies have already been trying to automate away for years in various ways. And so I think it might have a slight impact maybe on development jobs, but I think that in the optimistic way of looking at that, it just opens up more people to work on far more interesting problems that an AI can't just generate a solution for instantly.
Yeah, and to everyone else's point, to be able to refine and validate that what it's generating is good and correct, you have to have that technical knowledge and know-how in the first place. So if someone uses it and it helps their job, I'm not worried about that, if they use it in the interview process. As long as in the end it's right and correct, that tells me that you at least have the knowledge to know what we'd be looking for. Doesn't matter to me what you use to build it.
All right, moving on to the next question. So what are some factors you see in interviews that separate senior from mid-level / intermediate devs, or any role for that matter?
I think mentorship is something I'm always looking for intermediate or senior level positions. Is how are you helping the people around you and also still learning from those other people? And what is that collaboration like? What is the communication like? And that's where I'm going to be asking you about the team dynamics and what have you learned from someone else that was more junior to you recently, or what have you been able to teach someone else recently? I want examples, so it can be off the cuff, that's fine, but that's another one of those situations where if you kind of gloss over it, I'm going to dig a little deeper and try to understand and ask more questions and try to clarify a little bit with that. So I think a lot of it is really where are you helping the team and how do you fit in that. You may be eventually less hands-on and more helping to manage other aspects of it, whether that's people or whether that's projects or whether that's coordinating between teams or various different ways that could look. It's more about the collaboration to me at that point.
I would definitely echo the mentorship aspect. Another thing I would look for in a senior person is their ability to and a drive to automate and live the DRY principle, do not repeat yourself. When they talk about how they did this thing over and over and over again and they built a system or they built a CLI tool or whatever it is to speed up their work and make themselves more efficient in the future, that to me is the mark of a senior developer.
I 100% agree with everything said already, but one of the things I like to ask, like upper intermediate to senior development candidates, is what they dislike about the technology they have the most experience with. And really what I'm looking for there is opinions. Like I want you to have opinions. As a senior dev, I need you to have opinions about the problems and the solutions in front of us and be able to explain to me what the problems are with the solution that's being proposed. And so I think having opinions about the tech stack or the language or whatever you have done in the past is really important, at least in my opinion.
Awesome. Moving on, next question. How close is close enough to apply to a position if you don't meet the essential requirements? It's a great question, by the way.
My personal vote is to always shoot your shot, If you're really far away, then they'll tell you.
I mean, the honest answer is that you're probably going to apply to a lot of places in a job hunt. And so throwing out another resume, filling in those text fields with your name and email and whatever else doesn't really cost you that much time, and it's worth a shot.
Yeah, I would say look at the list of required skills versus optional skills, et cetera, but with the required ones, there's still wiggle room on that. If you are very early in your career, I wouldn't apply to a senior position, but if it's asking for a minimum of 2 to 3 years experience, what does experience mean? Is that, maybe you worked at a startup company in college while you were doing smaller projects, or maybe some of the actual classwork that you did might count towards experience, or some of the other things that you could point to, a side project, et cetera. And you tell me about those if you make it into the interview process, because I'm going to ask you, so what is your experience like? I want to talk to you. I want to learn more about this type of thing from you. And so I would say, yes, shoot your shot for sure, but just understand a little bit of there's going to be some requirements there that they are expected to meet. But the first line of defense may also not be someone who's very familiar with the specifics of the role, and so you may get turned down on some because you don't meet some of these requirements, and that's okay. But yeah, there's no harm in asking and applying.
Yeah, because there's always a chance that you get lucky in the terms of like, I'm looking for a mid-level dev, but none of the mid-level devs that applied are a great culture fit, or there's some other misalignment, and it actually might make more sense to go with the more junior person that is a better fit.
And too, with a lot of the candidates that I can tell are applying early, like earlier than maybe this position would call for, I'll message them. I'll send them resources. I'll give them the take-home project that we used to assign, and have them give that a shot. And when they feel comfortable with that, I'll tell them that might be a good time to reapply. So it's a good opportunity to start showing interest in those companies. So when you come back in a year and a half, that's a great sign that you've been pursuing the same role for so long. And then building those relationships with recruiters and hiring managers early is just another piece of that networking that could come in handy.
Awesome. Good answers, everybody. Next up, in your opinion, what do all the amazing candidates have in common? I know there's been some of this sprinkled out throughout it, but anything new to share?
Say, regardless of how introverted or extroverted, if you're willing to try to have a conversation with me, that is a recurring theme in a lot of my answers. But like as Wes has alluded to too, sometimes we're interviewing a lot of people for certain roles, or we are interviewing for multiple different roles. In some cases, that's not our primary job as well, and so we're also trying to do our day job as well as try to help with this because we don't have as many assets available to help fill the needs there, and so. I make it interesting for the people to make yourself stand out, and that always helps. Is just to be able to not feel like I'm repeating myself over and over, saying the same thing, and I'm having a conversation with a person.
I think it's a lot about honesty, not just in. I think it revolves a lot around what you don't know, which I think Tim mentioned earlier, where, nobody's going to know everything. And, hopefully you're trying to get a job that you're barely qualified for because you want a challenge, or you're straight out of college and you have no experience. And so being honest about what you do and don't know, being honest about what you want to learn, and then being honest about what you're looking for in a company, coming back to all those culture answers from earlier, is really important.
Awesome. All right, next up, self-taught, boot camp, or CS degree. Does it matter?
Not to me.
Same.
Great. Self-taught almost maybe can be better because it shows initiative. But that's hard to do too, and it's okay if you also need school or a boot camp to get started.
I think self-taught can often speak to their experience better than the other. Like people who are self-taught and have done a lot can often speak to their work, their projects, the problems that they had in a way that sometimes people coming out of school or from a boot camp can't. But that doesn't mean somebody coming with a CS degree or coming from a boot camp can't talk about those things. It's just often the person who's, you know, done it themselves from scratch has had to solve problems in different ways.
So I will say from my experience, I love to see the self-teaching in the dev boot camp. I feel like a dev boot camp is really just like a structured, you know, teaching, like self-teaching all of them. But the computer science programs, sometimes their curriculum is, you know, made several years ago, and this industry changes very fast. And so self-teaching along with that can be super beneficial to see those personal projects to build up those repos once you graduate is super important. Sometimes I feel like the degree from a college might not get you quite ready for that entry-level role just yet.
I hope we don't have too many
Personal.
college students in the audience regretting their decisions. It's still good. Don't worry.
I
It'll be fine.
actually have a little bit of a contrary position on that.
That's cool.
So, not just because Ms. Markley is sitting here staring at me.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Right. Yeah. But no, seriously. I think that anything that you can do to set yourself apart, especially like Wes was talking about before, where we have a lot more people that can apply for companies that are supporting a remote policy. You're showing that you can follow structure, that you can work with other people, you can work for a boss in whether it's a professor or whether it's, you know, team projects and things like that where someone else is the lead. Whatever the situation is, we see a lot of resumes, and so I think self-taught will be harder to get to catch the eye of someone. So if you can be really good and have things that stand out about it, that's great. If you also have a degree, whether that's an associate's or a bachelor's, master's, whatever it is, it depends on the role as to some, you know, there's some companies that will still require that. And so, you know where you're applying and know what you're aiming for in a role that you're looking to try to achieve. But I think that anything you can do that, you know how to play the game, you know how to take classes and succeed at them, even if they aren't your high interest classes where, okay, there's a lot of business classes that I took. I've got a degree in computer information systems, which is also a lot of business classes. And so that has helped me throughout my career because I understand the business aspects of what I'm trying to solve with my software. Whereas if I was only focusing directly on writing code and how to do that quickly, I wouldn't get as much experience with that. But there's certainly things, to other people's point too, where I didn't learn. Like when I went through school, I didn't learn about source control. That wasn't something that we ever was ever taught in any of our classes, and so that was something I had to understand on how do we keep track of our code. And that was something that people would understand more on their own. So.
And just for the record, I did hear a degree and self-taught. And all of the above is also a good option.
Yes.
Believe it or not, software engineering is a very hard discipline to learn. All right, moving on. So most open positions now require a bachelor's degree. Is an associate's degree still valuable in today's market? Very related to the prior question.
I would say yes, and I don't know that all require a bachelor's degree. I would contest that assumption, but I also haven't been searching the job market to verify that. But I think that an associate's degree is still very valuable, even if it's more of a certificate, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. Again, anything that you can do is still valuable, and whether you have the resources or whether you have the time, everyone has a different situation, and as interviewers and people who are looking at resumes, we understand that. We've been through that ourselves, and so I would say that any of it is valuable, whatever you can, helps you learn the best and prepares you the best.
Yeah, I don't work at the big companies who might have those requirements, but I would think that would be one that you might ignore and try anyway. If you can show your work, if you have lots of work in your portfolio, and especially if you have deployed sites or, if it's web work, deploying the site and putting that on your resume or in your cover letter or wherever so that it's super easy for someone to find because the work speaks for itself more than a degree.
Awesome. All right. Next one, I'm actually going to combine two. So any advice for interviewees when negotiating salary and compensation? And is it ever too soon to talk about pay? So focus on the compensation part. Any advice for interviewees negotiating salary and compensation? We'll start there. I'll follow up with the other one later.
That's a great, tough question. Good contribution. That's all I got.
I would say you have to keep in mind like what your end goal is and what's most important. Because there's a huge range of salaries in web dev. If your primary goal is to get a high salary, then negotiate hard and stick to it, you know? Of course, show your value so that you might actually get that job. But if your main goal is to find a company where you really like the culture and the values, make sure they know that you're open to taking a lower salary if you are, and ideally specify a minimum. One person I hired recently had a range of, it was $35,000 range with a plus at the end. But it was great because he truly was open. He knows the lay of the land. But in the end, you know, he was looking for a specific company with a specific culture and type of work. And that allowed us to still be able to like talk to him without just shutting him away because there's so many applicants. So yeah, first of all, identify what you really want and then cater your response toward that. And it might look different from company to company. The company that you really want to work for, you might give a lower minimum than somebody that you're not as excited to work for, and that's totally fine.
I'm on the fence about giving minimums myself because I don't, like for the applicant, I worry about that sometimes, but at the same time, if a company offers you the minimum you gave them, make sure that they can justify why. I don't think, like, most companies are not going to try to lowball you on that, but it also is, especially if you're earlier in your career, you got to factor in several different things. How much do you know more than the next person? How much have you set yourself apart? What trajectory do you have? Where's your growth pattern that you're trying to go to? The broader thing I would look at as well is that compensation packages as a whole can vary a lot from one company to another. Even just contract jobs versus full-time employment. Within full-time employment, there's all sorts of different other benefits like healthcare and 401k, et cetera. All of those are factors. Not to say that that doesn't change the fact that I need a certain salary or I expect this salary. I would say learn your worth as best you can. Try to do some research. Ask people and do some online research about, you know, what are the averages for someone with this amount of experience going into this field and this type of role, et cetera. But I would say negotiate where you can, and if someone tells me that if I get to the point where I'm giving them an offer and they tell me that that's not going to work for them, then I want to talk to them about that. Give me another number. It doesn't mean that I can make it work, but I'm not going to be offended if you try to ask. Now, if you are asking for something way unreasonable, then let's find that out early on, because then we don't have to keep both of our time continuing on when it's not going to fit.
I'm going to take on the second question there, is it ever too early? From an interviewer perspective, I want to know your number the first time I talk to you. That is one of my goals, is to get your number, because I need to know, are we even talking the same language here? Do we have the same number of zeros at the end of this number? That kind of thing. From a candidate perspective, I think it's always too early to talk about numbers. Now, because, you don't want to lowball yourself. You don't want to, take less money than you're worth, and it's really hard to know what you're worth, especially if this is your first job out of college. It's very difficult. And also, that doesn't give you time to showcase your skills. Like, you want to show somebody that you're awesome, and then have your number that's slightly higher than they want to pay you, so that they can have conversations internally about whether or not they should pay you that or not. So I think, as a candidate, if at all possible, if you can delay that conversation, it can work in your favor if you can show well in the interviews, but it can be difficult to get through that first interview with, or even the application process. You know, they often want a number in a text box along with your resume. So it is cool that some states are mandating salary ranges, though. That can really help. I think that will really help candidates in the future as more states kind of jump on that bandwagon, so that you at least know, okay, what is their minimum? Is that going to work for me? If yes, then I should move forward.
I don't believe Missouri is one of those states, but
No, they are not.
but yeah. All right.
But if you move to Colorado or California, I think they got
Well,
you.
and you know, the employers in the room and the hiring managers in the room, you know, can give that information up without the state telling them they have to. Just saying, guys.
They could.
Say that as somebody with the job posting that has a salary range. So, all right. So thank you for the answers there. I think I got them both covered. So the next one is, what is the hardest position to fill in your company's development side? It just got jumped, so we're going to answer that one first, and then I'll jump to the next one. Do you have any openings out there that are hard to fill, or historically have been hard to fill?
Our hardest positions to fill are sort of very senior solution architect kind of roles, and a lot of it comes down to, you know, a lot of companies, I won't say every company, but a lot of companies have very specific tech stacks that they work on, maybe with a lot of customizations on top of it, where one of the most valuable pieces in a solution architect is knowing all the stuff that they're working on top of when they are making new solutions. And so it can be very, very challenging, but that also gives internal people a lot more growth opportunities, because they are the best people to fill those positions.
Any others stand out, or should we move on? All right, I'm gonna start hitting these a little faster. We're coming up on an hour. All right, do you check GitHub repos for activity in the hiring process?
Yes. That's very important, especially at this stage of intern, entry level. If you can have those, that's a real deal. And honestly, even if you get to the point, you know, maybe you've been at a job for 1 or 2, even 3 years, I'll always ask even people with 5, 6, 7 years of experience if they have any. You know, sometimes they don't. Like you mentioned, you know, they work on work projects that they can't disclose. But that's always super cool to be able to see that real work, and potentially save you the trouble of having to go through whiteboarding or having to go through technical you know, hoops if you already have that work to show.
I would say it's not so much about the activity as far as how frequently you're committing and such to GitHub. It's nice to be able to go look at something, whether that's a design portfolio that you have, whether it's code out in a GitHub repository or something. I would definitely mention it if you have something, but have something of substance out there if you're going to share that with someone, because that gives me an interested point that I can go look at and also talk to you about, because I'm trying to help learn more about you and what you're into, what you are good at, and a lot of the stuff that you're going to be checking into that code, I can, you know, also look to see how much of this looks like it's custom code or how much of this is boilerplate stuff that someone just copied and put in, which is what we do 90% of the time during our day job, is that we're building on top of other things that are already built or using other solutions, et cetera, that are open source and all that. But I need to be able to see what can you write as well. And so it gives me something to look at. It's an extra way to stand out. Especially earlier in your career, it helps, but it's not the end all be all for me, especially not activity. I know a lot of places have put emphasis on how frequently are you committing, and do you fill up the green squares on GitHub or whatever else throughout the calendar, and that's not something that I pay attention to personally.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is on that GitHub account, you should have some meaningful commits. I've had a lot of GitHub links sent to me where it is boilerplate code, totally fine, understand, start on my projects with that too, and then they've made one commit to change green to red in some CSS, and that was their change to the project. It's like, kind of wasted my time here, and you've kind of poisoned my view of you, even without anything else.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to filter through some of the questions, so because I don't think we're going to get to all of them tonight. All right, so there we go. I'm grabbing one. What does a student need to do or have to get an internship?
I've got a good one. Can I plug something here? So Midwestern used to be able to take on quite a bit more interns and entry-level people, and sometimes that wave kind of does happen. But we do have kind of one sure, fast way to get an internship with Midwestern, and each year we'll do, we call it the Midwestern Mashup. It's an internship competition. It's an app design contest. So there's a website. It's called MidwesternMashup.com. I have some swag here with me with a QR code to it. And it does require a partner. So it's a designer and a developer have to work together to create an app, essentially. And so that deadline's April 17th. So if you'd like a shot at a paid summer internship with Midwestern, that's one good way to do it.
We have a real talent acquisition pro up here tonight.
I think we also heard mention of OpenSGF and Hack for Good, so plugs are totally reasonable, especially if the audience takes part in them. So any other ideas, thoughts for people looking for internships? What should they do?
Say social network, come talk to me afterwards, talk to these other panelists, talk to other people that you know that work at other places, and just applying isn't always going to set yourself apart. And so talk to us about what you're interested in, what you're working on. Maybe if you're in the middle, if you're in school still and you're trying to learn, like, do I want to go into UX? Do I want to be a developer? Do I want to go into some other aspect of the field? Have those conversations and get to know people. And just put yourself out there. I know sometimes as introverted folks might struggle with that a little bit more, but you can also do that online. If I see anyone locally that tries to send me a LinkedIn invitation, I'm almost guaranteed to accept it, and I will probably reply back if I can, say hello or whatever else. So just try to make some sort of connection with different people, and that will help you find those opportunities better.
Same. I want connections on LinkedIn so that when we have a job post, I've got people and captive audience there ready to be interested. So definitely send LinkedIn connection requests. Is that the right connect? Yeah.
Awesome. That actually answered a later question, so thank you. All right. On the LinkedIn track, can you guys, do you use social media of the candidate when making a determination to hire or to interview somebody? What is the part it plays?
Yeah. If you're going to put stuff out there publicly, I'm definitely going to go look. Like, I'm not going to go try to send you a fake friend request or any of that sort of stuff, but I want to get to know you as best I can. And so even if you don't put a link to your Twitter account, I'm going to go check Twitter to see, do you have an account that I can find that's easily there? Because then I can see, what are you interested in? Are you posting about anything about code or about design? Are you following other things? I found out from one interview on their LinkedIn profile, they put a hobby has something to do with, it was inflatable water polo. I had to ask in the interview, what is that? Because I was very interested in it, and that interview stood out to me more than any other candidates for that job because it was unique and fun and cool. And so, yes, that's a real thing, by the way.
And to that point, too, take advantage of social networks' privacy features. If you want to post stuff that's a little more edgy, that shows your youth and your experimentation, whatever, do it. But just make sure it's private to only a group of people that you really trust. Make sure that you understand what's fully public to everyone, and think about what shows for prospective employers.
At some point during the process, I'm going to Google your name. That's all I'll say.
All right. We'll do two more. So what are some of the best questions you've been asked by interviewees?
Maybe it's just because I'm a Leo, but I like it when people ask about my experience with the company. I like it when people ask me what my favorite part about working with Midwestern is and what my least favorite part is. Because I think it means they trust my experience and are interested in real accounts of what it's like.
I always like it when you come prepared with questions of any kind, so I'll preface that. But then also if they are contextual questions of, I know that this job describes this and the company does this, so what is this like on a day-to-day basis? And so I yes, understanding what the role is, but like, do I work with other people very often? Do we have daily stand-ups? Do we do whatever else? Because that shows me the interest of you care about what your job is going to be like day to day as well. And that also helps give me a better opportunity to see, here's what we are like, here's what you say you're looking for. Do we feel like this is a good fit? Because we don't want to hire someone who gets into the job and 6 months later decides they don't want to be there anymore because it wasn't what they were expecting. So I would say you are evaluating us, and in particular the company, just as much as we are evaluating you as a candidate. And so do your due diligence, ask good questions. If you can't think of any questions, then ask our perspective on something, or a question you may have asked a different interviewer. Say, I've already asked this to so-and-so, but I'd like your opinion. What do you think about this? And so have some sort of interaction there, and we will almost always save time at the end of the interview for questions from you. So expect that.
That's the same question that came to mind for me, is like, what does the day-to-day look like?
The one thing, a couple of questions maybe came to my mind, but the one that really sticks out is I had somebody ask me, so they were a person trying to make a career transition. So they had a different job and they went to a code boot camp and they were trying to transition into being a developer. And they asked me if for a person in this position, what do they do when they don't know the answer to a question or they need help? And I thought that was really good. It let me as an interviewer describe our internal culture and how we sort of help new people. And it's also showed a good recognition of the fact that this person probably didn't know everything, which is absolutely correct. But it also showed me that she cared about getting help and making sure that she could still accomplish what she was given, even if she didn't know the answer to things. So I really liked that question. We actually hired her, and she's actually fantastic. So I made a good call there.
Awesome. And last question. This one will be a little bit less opinion-based, but maybe we'll end on an easy one. So what tech stack do you see most in the industry? Imagine that's for people looking to invest time in a tech stack or a couple tech stacks to kind of boost their skills, be more marketable.
So Midwestern Interactive is an embedded teams provider, so we serve lots of clients in lots of different stacks. Really the most common that we serve is JavaScript, React, Node. But we do a little bit of stuff in PHP, Laravel, .NET, C#, Python, Java. So those are all kind of smaller niche clients. I would really say the bread and butter is the React Node space.
I always recommend JavaScript and Node.js because it's front end and back end, and almost every company uses JavaScript in some form or fashion.
I would say that unless you're specializing just in front end, then learning some kind of SQL, whether that's NoSQL or whether that's SQL Server, whether that's, there's lots of different flavors out there, document databases, some sort of data management and data storage is always good for any sort of developer to know, even a front end developer, but also people that are either trying to do full stack or more emphasis on the back end. We at Duck Creek are primarily a .NET and Microsoft shop, and so we use Azure, we use .NET, we use .NET Core a lot of times. We use Angular for the front end because that plays nicely with that. But I've also worked in plenty of other languages. I would say also, if you're looking to apply different places, don't be concerned too much about the tech stack if it's something that you could at least be interested in, because those change, and the job may or may not. I'm still solving problems writing software, regardless of, and the technologies are gonna shift. And so, my first job, I graduated in 2005, was writing COBOL, and so it wasn't that long ago, as much as it sounds like it now. But we were writing .NET, and we were writing SQL, and we were writing ASP and other things too. And then it's progressed. I've written in PHP, I've written in Python, and written a lot of different JavaScript languages, React and Angular. Like, it all changes, and so don't get hung up on that. Just be willing to learn and be willing to adapt what you have learned from one language to another.
I think JavaScript is definitely the most prevalent that I've seen, but what I would encourage people to do is it's a balance between focusing strictly on one language or one tech stack, which, could present problems in the job search, but also don't fall for the other sort of end of the spectrum and just like dabble in a bunch of stuff. Get further into React, then create React app, and then make a button do a thing. Like whatever you are trying to learn, make sure you're trying to solve some meaningful problems in that technology so that you can at least speak to those things. So even if the company you're interviewing for doesn't, do React, you can still talk about how you solved interesting problems with React. And most hiring managers, most people on the hiring chain at any organization will hopefully be able to recognize that and recognize that you've been solving interesting problems with technology regardless of what the language was. And if they don't recognize that, then you might not want to work there anyway.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists. I think you made it just under an hour. So that's pretty bold of you. I apologize if you were expecting less and got stuck up there. Next, we are going to draw for the Andy's gift cards, I believe. Waiting on our... All right, and I will, just a quick poll. Who is going to be able to stick around a little bit afterwards? It's okay if the answer's no. Okay. So after we get done, you guys can come up and ask follow-up questions or just introduce yourself. I think all of them said they like to meet people. And so just shaking their hand and saying your name is sometimes just good enough. You ready?
We had someone fill out the survey at the last minute.
And it threw everything off. All right, and you don't actually have to be here to win. So for those of you watching the stream, if you filled out the survey, you are in the drawing as well. While we're waiting, just a reminder, some of the plugs you heard earlier, Hack for Good is coming up, looking for volunteers. I think I heard that correctly. We also got Open FGF meets regular. We got a plug for Midwestern Mashup. So a lot of cool things coming. Any more plugs?
Yeah, since I'm here. There's also a Springfield Women in Technology group that started back up at the beginning of this year. We have quarterly programming, and we're on Facebook and Meetup. So definitely check us out there. We have some events that are more geared toward women and gender minorities, but we also have some that are open to everyone. So feel free to check us out there and follow along, and we hope to see you at an upcoming event.
Yeah, I think you guys even let me speak one time, so definitely open to more than just women.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the only other thing that was called out, Squared, March 8th. Free conference, check it out. For the students in the room, I believe they're working on a student night. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but there will be a night focused more specifically on students. So, are we good yet?
All right, we got everyone's name who filled out the survey in this little random name picker. If you're here tonight, we'll hand it to you. If you are not here, we've collected email addresses and or Discord usernames. We'll reach out to you that way. All right, and we got...
Do you want a mic?
Yes, actually I do. Thank you. Okay. As we said earlier, we got 4 of these. There's $10 on each of them. So let's spin this wheel. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. If you are not here, can you write the names down for those who are not here? Okay, thank you so much. Okay. And lucky winner number 1, Jordan. Is Jordan here? It might be Jordan. Okay, all right. We will reach out to you over Discord and send you your... We'll find a time to hand off this physical gift card
in some way. Was there an option to do that? I can only read like half the screen. Okay. If Jordan wins again, I apologize. Miranda. All right. Okay. Here you go. You don't need to write that one down. We got it.
While they're doing the next spin, I'd like to congratulate Crystal Campbell for being the most proactive LinkedIn user in the audience. I already have a connection request. Crystal Campbell, good job.
Nope. $10. Oh, Shannon, nice. And last one, right? Yeah. Okay. There, you can't win twice. Removed you from the list. Oh, Kevin. Do we have a Kevin here? Okay, I think we have their email. We'll follow up with them. Okay, that is it. Thank you so much. Anything else that we need to go over? Okay, I'll get back over in the camera. Quick reminder, we're going to meet next month on March 2nd, I think is the 1st. March 1st, I'll be speaking about, like I said earlier, .NET and why you should care. We hope to see you all there. Please help yourself to any more pizza if there's any left over. But otherwise, have a fantastic night. Thank you for making it out.